At any rate, here we go with the main part of our program, and I'm pleased to say that Tony Guida is going to introduce our guest, an honoree. We're going to give her a very handsome plaque, and I will read the inscription. And then she has some remarks. I've been told that she's articulate, and I told her she has to prove it tonight, and she agreed. And not only that, when she finishes her remarks, we're going to have time for a few Q&A. So I think that'll be a treat. And if anybody has to leave to catch a train, a bus, a plane, space shuttle, don't worry. You can leave, and Gloria won't mind. At any rate, it's my pleasure to introduce our immediate... Oh, wait, one other thing. One other thing. I want to introduce one other person who is Gloria's guest tonight, who many of us know from television in New York for many, many years, and that's Carol Jenkins. Carol. Now, there's an ulterior motive about that, because after that great reception, she's going to have to join the Silurians. I didn't tell you that, Carol. Okay, now, I know you've been waiting anxiously for Tony Guida. Here he is.
Thank you, Mike. It's great to see so many of you tonight. And before I begin, of course, you've all turned off your cell phones, haven't you? Which you can do now, otherwise we're going to shoot you if they go off during Gloria's talk. I hadn't planned to say this, but I didn't know Carol was going to be here tonight, and I have to tell you an anecdote about Carol and me. We worked together in 1970. You know, that was the Grant administration here at a station, and I immediately fell in love with her. And I tried to romance her, and then I said, Carol, I'd like to marry you. And she turned me down with just the most cogent logic I've ever heard. She said, you're already married. You've turned off the cell phones, right? I know you all saw the story on the front page of the Times today about Gloria Steinem. Mattel, the toy company, is giving Barbie a hammer. She's about to become a construction worker. Now, we might observe that Mattel, a little slow coming around to this bit of gender-neutral thinking. After all, Barbie is 50 years old. But, okay, they're giving her a hammer. Now, the story, unfortunately, did not mention Gloria Steinem. But when I read it, I thought, who else would Barbie thank for this new profession? I have two daughters. They were both born in the 1970s, which was terrific timing on their part, because Gloria Steinem was already fiercely hard at work for them in the field of feminism. And that work, Gloria has always defined as a revolution, not a reform, a revolution. And we all know that revolutions don't succeed overnight. Sometimes they don't succeed for years. Sometimes, I guess, they don't succeed at all. And sadly, sexism is still rampant in our culture, in every culture. I saw this statistic. Every year, 6 million women are lost to genital mutilation, sex trafficking, domestic abuse, and other horrors. 6 million women every year. And if you need further evidence that sexism is abundant in our culture, all you have to do is look back at something Gloria said years ago. Pretty simple, but a profound observation. She said, "I've never heard a man ask for advice on how to manage a career and marriage." That precise subject was what Gloria Steinem wrote about in a piece for Esquire magazine in 1962. Now, that, by the way, was a year before a book called, excuse me, a year before a book called The Feminine Mystique came on the scene. 1962. And 50 years on, Gloria Steinem has not lost a step in fighting for her revolution. This world of ours has always been ruled by men, and what a mess we have made of it. Would women have done better? Well, despite your enthusiasm, I don't know that we can know that. But we can know this. Gloria Steinem's lifelong crusade has brought us closer to the day when women are going to get that chance. My two daughters couldn't be here tonight. They both live in Europe. But if they were here, this is what they would say. Gloria Steinem, we are honored to be in your presence, and thank you.
Gloria, it's my pleasure. Okay, Gloria, it is my pleasure to present you with this plaque, which is inscribed with the medallion of the Society of Silurians and with the comments, Society of the Silurians Lifetime Achievement Award presented to Gloria Steinem in recognition of a lifetime of excellence as a writer, editor, feminist, and activist whose advocacy for gender equality has placed her in the pantheon of civil libertarians everywhere. Gloria.
You know, these occasions, no, this is a unique occasion. So it is because, as all the other awardees said, it is about peers. It is about our community. And it's sort of so pleasurable you don't know what to do with yourself, you know? And it feels like a special kind of chutzpah to address this august group. So I requested that we have some question and answer time, and I'm expecting you to give me answers, not just questions, because it just doesn't feel right to have this kind of old-fashioned hierarchical setting here with me lecturing to you and you looking at each other's backs. I mean, hierarchy is based on patriarchy. Patriarchy doesn't work anywhere anymore, including in this room. So I hope we can turn this into a organizing meeting, which will, result in creative trouble tomorrow and the next day and the next. But I've been trying to think why this award means so very much to me. I mean, first of all, it's for a lifetime, which is, serious and huge. And it's actually, in my case, a reminder of age and mortality that I definitely need, because I have a deep conviction that I'm immortal. And this causes me to plan poorly. So, actually, I did have another reminder recently, though, because I was campaigning. I got scared, and I went out and campaigned a lot, so I was on television and so on. And I was trending on Twitter, and people thought I was dead, because why? Why else would I be trending on Twitter? Right. So I've had one other reminder of mortality. But then on top of that, here is this tradition that stretches from Walter Cronkite to Ruth Goober. I mean, this is amazing. How can I possibly live up to this? And Ruth Goober, I looked up, is now 101. And so I'm she is my role model, because I'm making it to at least 100. But in a way, I think that we are all like Russian dolls. We have layers of our younger selves within us all the time, and they're really still present. And so what tonight stirs up in me is the memory of my mother, who, when I was very little, began to show me how to take a piece of typing paper and fold it into 3, so it was columns, so you could hold it in your hand like a reporter's notebook, because there were no such things manufactured at the time when she was a journalist. And indeed, when she tried to be a journalist, her very first writing had to be under a man's name, otherwise she couldn't get published. She worked at the Toledo News-Bee, long defunct, and the Toledo Blade. She was editor of the Women's Page, and she became she became Sunday editor, which must have been quite extraordinary, as it was not a woman's position. It was a profession she loved. She loved with all of her heart. And yet it was so difficult, and there were so many barriers in so many different ways, including my father, who was not a barrier. He was an absolutely wonderful, terrific, funny man, but he had 2 points of pride. He never wore a hat, which in his generation one was supposed to do, and he never had a job. He was a dreamer. He was always going off and trying to start summer resorts and so on. And this became just too much for her to keep track of, and she'd given birth to my older sister. She just couldn't do it all. So by the time I came along, she had given up everything she loved and cared about. From a professional point of view. And that paper, folded in 3, was the habit of a life that she had lost. So I suspect that, like many women now, I am living out the unlived life of my mother. And I bet a lot of men here, too, are living out the dreams of their fathers or the dreams of their parents. And this is a huge step forward. We should be proud of this. But it's also true that we need to move forward to a time when parents live out their own dreams. And so children don't feel that they have to carry on in order to make up for lost talents and lost lives. I think, however, of all the reasons I'm really moved by this award, I have to say that a big one is how much my mother would have loved it. She wanted so much to come to New York, to be a journalist here. She would have loved so much to be in your company. So of all the big, big reasons, and they are big reasons, that I'm honored, I think I feel that one the most deeply. Now, I was also trying to figure out how to say why I love journalism so much, And there were so many reasons that I finally got reduced to putting them into 10 top reasons like David Letterman. I have to warn you, though, these are not so funny, and they're not so short. But it's a device. What can I say? Right, okay. I would say that 10 is that it's a portable profession because you can do it almost anywhere. I once interviewed circus people who told me that the sword swallower is the aristocrat and the most envied person in the circus world because he or she, although I have to say I've never seen a female sword swallower, doesn't need a high wire or elephants or even a tent. The sword swallower can work wherever, and it's possible to attract a crowd. And I think the same is true for us, and even more so now that technology has made it possible for us to put words in so many, many different places. We don't need the stock market or a movie studio or a laboratory. We are the sword swallowers of the professional world. 9. Being a journalist is like getting paid for learning. Yes. Don't you feel that? Yes. You can follow your ahas, you can follow your interests, you can, it's just such an enormous luxury. Of course, we have to take editors with us, and, you know, right. And of course, especially today, we have to figure out how to eat. I mean, you know, it's a little complicated, but okay. It's basically, we're getting paid, we hope we're getting paid to learn. 8, writing also allows you to say what you wish you'd said on the spot. You can go home and write your mot d'escalier, you know, that you write. Right. For instance, the other day, I spent 3 hours of waiting on the tarmac in a plane, and finally the pilot offered us a free movie to pacify us. And the young man next to me said, "I don't watch chick flicks." I don't know if I could have changed him on the spot, but I went home and described both chick flicks, which are more dialogue than special effects, more relationships than chases, more suspense about how people live than how they die, right? And then I thought, how about prick flicks? For all the movies that have spent more time glorifying World War II as the last time we could be both violent and right. Do you know, I understand that we have now spent more money making films and television series about World War II than was spent on World War II. Okay. And all the shoot-em-ups with no dialogue to translate overseas, you know, which is very appealing, and everything with more interest in death than life. Not to mention with women usually younger and less clothed than men. So, if I am aided by being guided toward chick flicks, why not aid fans toward prick flicks by giving them this? It's perfectly helpful, don't you think? Okay. 7. So, actually, in this way, I came to understand the journalistic politics of adjectives. The superior thing doesn't need an adjective, and the inferior one does. Have you ever noticed that? Thus, there are chick flicks, and all the rest are just movies. There are Hispanic leaders, but not Anglo leaders. There are women novelists, but not male novelists. There are gay soldiers, but not heterosexual soldiers. You may say that the majority doesn't need an adjective, but in about 20 minutes, the majority of this country is no longer going to be European American. So I think that all of us better learn to start saying European American. 6, unlike academics, journalists have to be understandable. How revolutionary is that? And that is huge when you think about it. I personally am going to put up signs on all the roads leading to Harvard and Yale that say, "Beware deconstruction ahead." 5, journalists have to meet deadlines. Now, I have to be frank, I'm still working on this since I was always working for magazines. My deadlines were weekly or monthly, and I never really got the hang of deadlines. As a result, I have a book that's so overdue that I have reached what I think of as the Studs Terkel school of deadlines. He asked me once about a book he was working on, and would I come and talk to him about it. And I said, "Yeah, what's your deadline?" And he said, me, I'm my deadline. So I'm getting there, you know. So right. 4, writing about issues and people who seem to be having a negative effect, even I find that pride of authorship takes over. And I regret this, but I feel I have to be accurate. It may be more pride than empathy, but it does help us to see other views. And I do think that when we write, we, out of pride of authorship, out of, you know, whatever the motive, it really forces us to look carefully at what we don't agree with. And that is very, very precious, and it may be the only profession in which this is truly the case. 3, we can make the invisible visible. As one random example, we can talk about the feminization of poverty, and we have, and that was a new phrase which helped us to understand the economic situation in this country. But we could also begin to name the masculinization of wealth, because without naming it, we're not going to solve the feminization of poverty. Actually, once in an editorial meeting at Ms. Magazine, we were looking for all the famous women who had slept their way to wealth and power. We kept hearing that this was a big possibility. And we thought, well, by any means necessary, let's see if we can find people who have actually done this. And it turned out that they had maybe slept their way to a nice house and charge cards. But who slept their way to real power were sons-in-law. And we made a list of everything that, you know, families that had the disaster of not having a son. Oh my God, you know, so they had to find a son-in-law and some, and it was just fascinating how long this list was. So I think we need to think about the masculinization of wealth, and all the daughters who get, you know, nice clothes and charge cards, but everything is controlled by trustees. I'm happy to say that women are rebelling now against this, and there are all kinds of groups of women of inherited wealth who are in rebellion against this, and who are giving their money in large quantities to other women's groups. There's Women Moving Millions. There's, you know, there are a lot of such groups. I also, here's something. I mean, I think that my next to the peak reason is that we as journalists figure out some sort of very basic questions. You know, for instance, why are we stuck in a place that tells us that there are 2 sides to every question? There are 5 sides to some. There are 12 to others. Why do we divide it into 2? It's a big part of the reason that the press is sometimes disliked by the public at large, because it's about hostility, it's about conflict, it's about, it's like a court battle. And it turns out that cultures that don't divide themselves so obsessively into masculine and feminine also don't divide all their issues into 2 sides. And there are cultures and countries where important questions always have at least 3 sides to make that point, or even more. So I think, you know, our profession causes us to look more deeply at the reason for the rules of our own profession and to figure out why it is and does it need to stay that way. For a long time, we had the who, what, where, why, when inverted pyramid rule, remember that? And that turned out to be a function of the telegraph machine, because before the telegraph machine, people had told their stories in essay form, short story form. The whole goal of Churchill as a journalist or other, was to put the reader in the place where the journalist was. But with the advent of the telegraph machine in a linear form, people who were not writers had to be taught to be writers and reporters, and so there was this formula. And now it's not linear anymore, so now we can use all of these essay and short story, all the kinds of forms we need in order to convey an entire human experience to the reader. And I think that the first reason I'm glad to be a journalist is that there are other journalists, and there are amazing, smart, incredible people who are producing the biggest ahas. There's a woman named Valerie Hudson who has written a book called Sex and World Peace, published by Columbia Press just a couple of months ago. And she has gone beyond what we knew before, which was that in original and tribal cultures, the degree of violence was predicted by the polarization of gender roles. So, if there was extreme polarization of masculine and feminine, it indicated violence in the society. But they have looked at 100 modern cultures, modern nations, and at great length, but very readable length, I might add, have pointed out that the single greatest determinant of whether a country is violent within itself, within its borders, or is militarily violent toward other countries, is not poverty, is not the presence or absence of natural resources, is not religion, is not even degree of democracy. It's violence against females. Not because female life is any more valuable than male life, of course not, it's not, but because that kind of violence is what we experience earliest, and we get the subject-object, masculine, feminine, controlled paradigm, and we come to think that it's inevitable or natural, or it feels like home. And, is this part of our foreign policy? No. But because of Valerie Hudson, a journalist and an academic, and the three other people who wrote this book, we are going to be able to look at the roots of violence. We are going to be able to say, why is it that this globe is no longer, as Tony was pointing out, that it's not equally divided anymore. Half the globe is no longer female. It's like 107 males to 100 because of female infanticide and because of, in our own country, domestic violence. If you added up all of the people who were killed in 9/11 and in Afghanistan and in Iraq, more women than that total have been killed since 9/11, murdered by their husbands and boyfriends. So, it is, I think, a chance, because of all the people who are writing so brilliantly and reporting so brilliantly now, we are beginning to see that there is no such thing as women's issues and men's issues. It is all united. It isn't that women are going to do a better job of looking after this world if we do it by ourselves. No, it's because we understand now that if a group of men make a decision by themselves, they are more likely to choose the most aggressive solution, even if it's wrong. And a group of women by ourselves are more likely to choose the most conciliatory solution, even if it's wrong. But if we have a group that really represents humanity as it exists, we are much more likely to have a full range of alternatives, and even more important, not to have the pattern on which all human violence and that isn't in direct self-defense and all human violence is based. So we have the power to say these things. You know, we have the power to change consciousness. We have the power to change language. How great is that? It is discouraging, I know, when it seems like the money and the power are elsewhere, but we have the power to change consciousness. And that is the single most important thing, because that is the sense of the possible and future. So I hope that we stick together and provide a community for each other in supporting this kind of exploration and purpose. I'm very, very, very proud to be in this room, and I hope that this is just the beginning of many subversive organizing cells to come. Thank you.
Gloria, thank you so much.